Along the years, video games has had an increasing need to be categorized to give people somewhat of an idea as to what they can expect from them. This need seemingly stems from that there's just so many darn games out there at this point, but also because people probably felt they needed a quick way to explain something to someone without that person having previous knowledge of a specific game. This system is admittedly kind of flawed. Both Super Mario 64 and Sonic Adventure 1 can be called 3D platformers, although their individual executions of the platforming genre can differ wildly. This is, I think, why a lot of people have started coming up with more specific terms lately. Instead of using genres, people have started using games as an example of what to expect, birthing genres like roguelike, Metroidvania, or, because of its overwhelming success, the often over and misused term Soulslike. And how fitting it is for us to end at a From Software title, because Lost Kingdoms is probably one of the company's most unique ones. Yeah, I was actually pretty shocked when I saw that this game was made by the creators of Kingsfield. I mean, who would have thought? I actually didn't play a lot of Lost Kingdoms 2 back when I was younger. I never owned the game myself, but I'd play it over at a friend's house and it recently slithered its way back from the deep recesses of my mind, and I suddenly felt the need to revisit it. And that's when I remembered that I never played the first one, so here we are. I have fond memories of Lost Kingdom 2. However, most of the time I just sit and watch one of my other friends play that one. I still remember it being unlike anything I'd ever seen before. Even to this day, it's uniquely unique, and as a result, I can't comfortably place it in a genre. Well, I guess we'll see if that changes once I give this one a thorough playthrough. Almost immediately upon starting the game, we're treated to an FMV cutscene. Hey, is it just me, or did almost every game have some sort of FMV back in the day? Nowadays, the games themselves look so good that it's almost exclusively done with the in-game engine. It's not really that long ago that this was the norm, but honestly, most in-game cutscenes these days look way better than this. I guess it's only here to introduce the players to the idea behind the universe they're thrust into, and it, kinda works. It's actually just a small snippet of barely a handful of the monsters you'll encounter, though they are all kinda unique, I guess. The story opens with a long wall of text explaining that a black fog has crept into the land and leaves nothing but nothingness in its wake. Anyone who tries to enter the fog are never heard from again, and it's slowly but surely making its way across the 5 kingdoms. It's setting the tone pretty well, I suppose. Well, that is, if you're able to remember any of it. The text scrolls just slowly enough to be read, but just fast enough to not give you any time to think about what it says. A soldier comes running into the throne room to relay a message to the Princess of Alanja, Ketya, the main character. Apparently, the king is out trying to combat the black fog, and in his absence, the fog has reached the castle, prompting our princess here, under order from the king if they were to be attacked, to take off with an old relic that's been guarded by the royal family for hundreds of years. Talking to the guards before running off will give you some sense of what's been going on. The black fog has seemingly swallowed up most of the kingdom by this point, and no one's heard anything from the people. The only place you're allowed to go is into the treasury, so it's pretty much just a straight path. I have to say, I do kinda like the design of the castle actually. These carpets have some nice designs, and the drapes hanging from the walls gives off a royal aura. The colors seem to be a bit washed out, however, which makes it seem a bit bland. It was probably meant to be this way to make certain stuff pop more. The color of most natural obstacles and environments have this, off-kilter look to them, while the monsters, chests, important characters, and objectives have a stronger visual presence, probably for the sake of drawing more of your attention. The problem is that because of this and the extremely low-res textures, the game seems more muddy than it could have. Honestly though, it's not that big of a deal since it's offset by a lot of different environments, especially for a game that's trying to hit that alternate reality invaded by monsters feel. Once you obtain the runestone, 2 skeletons spawn in. One of them is taken care of in that same sequence, but the other one you'll have to defeat yourself. You get a small text tutorial and then you're on your own. Now, I'm no game designer, but I don't think you're leaving a very good first impression when you place the camera directly behind a pillar so that you can't see the enemy you're facing in the first combat encounter of the game. After defeating the Skelly and making your way back up to the top of the staircase, you're greeted by someone. Thanks, camera. And she just goes right off and starts insulting you. Rude? Well, rude or not, this old coot is actually pretty important. She's apparently the only one that can teach us how to handle these cards. Well, unless you know how to read these stone tablets, that is. The next level is just one huge tutorial, however, it does make the best out of it. You're not really peppered down with information, but it's pretty close. Thankfully, this isn't the most complex game. They did a good job of simplifying it. I imagine they could have made it a lot more convoluted if they wanted to. It also helps that you're given an opportunity to test out everything you learn right after you learn it. All around the levels you'll find chests with cards in them. And that's a good thing, because you only start out with like 15, and you're able to carry up to 30 at once in a deck. You might think that that's a bit much, but the main gimmick here is that after you've used a card and it's depleted, you can't use it again unless you exit and re-enter the level, or have a card that heals other cards. This, alongside an elemental weakness mechanic, makes it imperative that you carefully build a deck that will not only help you defeat enemies effectively, but also sustain you throughout the level. The elemental weaknesses are pretty simple. It's mostly how you'd expect it to be if you've played Pokemon, but if you for some reason forget, there's a handy reference in the top left corner. Rotating from left to right, the order is: water is effective on fire, fire on wood, wood on rock, and rock on water. And then the other way around for what they're less effective against. There's also a fifth element called neutral. There's like 13 cards with the neutral element, so they're kinda rare, but only for a little over half of them does the element actually matter. If you're stuck without the right elemental card against something, you can still deal damage with an opposing element, but not as much. If you attack with the same element or the element that's diagonal from it in the circle, it'll be like attacking with a neutral card. No weaknesses, but no strengths either. The only bad thing about the deck mechanic is that no matter how you build your deck, all the cards in it will be shuffled and have their draw orders be randomized once out in the level. This means that you'll sometimes have to discard a ton of cards just to get to the right one, and discarding a card means you can't use it again in the same battle unless you have a card that refreshes your deck. This deck mechanic is a huge part of what makes this game unique. I had a lot of fun just messing around with all the different decks I crafted, specifically to combat each stage's elemental types of enemies. But the deck building itself isn't the only thing that makes this game special. Another huge component that sets this game apart from other games is the combat. They do a pretty good job explaining this in the tutorial too. First off, it's important to note that you need these crystals that enemies drop when damaged when using the cards. If you don't have enough, you'll use a chunk of your HP relative to how many crystals is needed to use the card. It's kind of like a mana system, and it's a cool way to have you weigh which cards to use, as not all of them are equally easy to hit with. There are 3 types of cards. Weapon cards will materialize and attack almost instantly. Independent cards are cards that you throw out which summon monsters that run around on the field and fight for you, or apply some sort of effect as a support function. And then there's the summon cards. The moment you use these, a short cutscene is triggered, which shows the monster being summoned and getting ready to attack. I guess they wanted these cards to feel kinda important in a way. And, well, yeah, I guess they are. There's a lot of different types of summons. Some heal you, some heal your cards, and some do both. Most of them deal damage though, and some cards are by far the deadliest cards in the game. Some of them can be kinda hard to hit with though, which I guess is the trade-off for having a huge amount of attacking power. Some are slower than others, but they all take a little while to, like, charge up their attack. They're bar none the best way to deal with slow foes, but for fast ones, the weapon cards are definitely the best. I think the weapon cards are the only type I don't have any big general issues with. Most of them has unique attacks, which means that you'll need to get used to the way they attack, but in my experience, when it first clicks, it never fails, and it's all on you if you miss. I wish the same could be said about the independent cards. There's a lot of buff and debuff cards here, which works fine, I guess, but the AI on the ones that actually attack could go for a massive overhaul. They're simply dumb. That's the best way I can describe them. I mean, they are useful, if only for the fact that sometimes they just act as a distraction while you pummel the enemies from behind. There are also different types of cards here, like with the summons. There are trap cards like the Stonehead, which when placed will fly up into the sky and drop on whoever walks underneath. You can even make combos with most trap cards if you throw out 3 at a time. I never found out what the Maelstrom combo did though. I could never really get it to activate. There are tanking cards, well, 2 of them, that pulls aggro from you by just being placed on the field. These can really break certain boss fights, and they're so helpful at times. Other than that, there are also monsters that move in a circle around you. My favorite card by far is the Juggernaut. I mean, just look at this, it's a freaking card just drifting around you. At the end of the tutorial level, there's this huge boss, and it was honestly kind of an awesome fight. While a lot of the normal enemies out in the levels are just target practice, the bosses raise the bar a bit by having you need to react to certain tells and figure out a strategy on the fly. It's not a hard game by all means, I died only a handful of times. The only time I ran out of cards and had to abort the level was during the final stage, but I'll talk more about that later. Sure, the elemental designations on the level select screen does help in determining which cards to bring, but I didn't really think about that until about halfway through the game. What makes it kind of easy is that, while you can't straight up edit your cards while in a level, you can add cards that you found along the way at these special stations that also heal you, by the way. This gives you another incentive to collect as many cards as possible. Aiding this is the old woman Gerd, who resides in the apothecary, which is unlocked after beating the Plains of Roel. This is more of a card shop than an apothecary really. Here you can sell and buy cards, but most importantly, you can transform or duplicate the ones you already have. Transforming cards is the only way to fully collect all the 105 different cards in the game. It's not required at all, but you can end up with some pretty powerful cards early on if you just plan ahead a little. The only problem is that you don't really know what the different cards will transform into until they have the required EXP to transform. All the cards gain experience based on which monsters they defeat. It doesn't help if they've just damaged them, the card that gets the EXP is the one that deals the lethal blow. I am a bit confused however at how the whole EXP system works. Sometimes when I defeat a certain enemy with one card, I get X amount of experience, but then when I defeat the same enemy with a different card, I get either less or more. Then it's the case of the cards that don't attack at all. How do they get experience? Well, you remember those crystals I talked about briefly? They also act as EXP. I'm somewhat uncertain of this, but I think all the cards in your deck gain experience equal to the number of crystals you've collected during a battle. If this was the only way to train your non-attacking cards, then certain transformations just wouldn't be worth it. You see, there's another mechanic you can use to train these cards: capture throws. These are performed by holding the left trigger and selecting a card. No matter which card it is, it'll instantly be depleted, but if you manage to lower an enemy to 0 with a capture throw, you get it in the form of a card. This is a lot of times the easiest way to get certain cards, so practice is necessary. The thing about capture throws though, is that they deal a laughable amount of damage, so you'll have to get the monster down as low as possible to have a shot. You can of course do multiple capture throws, but that's also the fastest way to burn through your deck. The most annoying aspect of this mechanic is that not every monster can be captured. Well, every monster can be captured, except for bosses. It's so dumb. Like, I tried capturing this boss and didn't get the animation of a successful capture when I hit it the last time, so I thought, oh, maybe it can't be turned into a card then. But no! On the very next screen where you choose your completion rewards, there it was. Up until this point, I'd actually gotten the bosses as a level completion reward every time, so I didn't really feel the need to go back in and play the level again. Imagine my surprise then when I found out that that's not actually possible. I have no idea why they would do this. There are certain things you can easily miss on the first playthrough of a stage, especially since they have a tendency to end rather abruptly without much of a warning. It's not until you've completed the game that you can go back, and at that stage, what's even the point? And it's not just cards you'll miss either. After going through Blasoon, or at least the ruins of what used to be Blasoon, you encounter this, fairy boy who collects red fairies. He'll reward you for every 10th or so red fairy you bring him. It's often well worth your time actually, because some of these cards he gives you are pretty great. At this point in the game, your only real objective is finding your father, King Theobane. It's already been established that you can't fight these monsters without a runestone, but I guess as king he's still gonna try. Along the path you meet a lot of soldiers. Most dead, some not dead. For being an RPG, there's a noticeable lack of people to talk to. It starts out kinda crowded, but as the game goes on you see less and less. Your only constant is Gerd, and returning to talk to her once in a while will unlock a secret level. These ones don't really have anything to do with the plot, but they're often filled with new cards and enemies to capture to further strengthen your deck, so they're always worth a visit. While tracking down the king, we meet a mysterious woman who also has a runestone and uses cards. This actually makes for a really interesting boss battle. It only happens a couple of times too, so it doesn't really wear out its welcome. She can use pretty much every card you can, or even more powerful ones for that sake. After defeating her, she gets away and we find another runestone. Turns out there are actually 5 of these scattered throughout the land, each belonging to their respective kings whose ancestors, after receiving them from some god, swore never to interfere with the other kingdoms ever again, and as such has had peace ever since. Of course, that all changed when the black fog monsters attacked. Collecting the runestone kinda levels you up, giving you an extra 50 HP and 5 crystals. It's very welcome at this point since a lot of cards start to have kinda high requirements around this time. After going through Burning Fields and fighting a lich and a zombie dragon, we finally catch up to the king. Sadly, he's on the ground dying, and just as he's starting to fade away, the level end screen appears. I just have to say, I find it pretty ironic that he was almost literally killed by a flying dad joke. This is also the only time we see any sort of emotion from our main character Katya here. She's like a textbook mute protagonist. If the textbook said, I don't know, whatever. Doesn't say anything, doesn't feel anything, just exists. Even some of these soldiers show more emotion than this. After the death of our dad, the objective shifts toward collecting all of the runestones. After collecting all but one, it's time for our final confrontation with the mysterious woman, Helena, who stole the one she has. It's still an enjoyable fight. I actually decided to have some friends over so that we could try out the 2-player mode. We quickly found out that having 2 intelligent players made things a bit different. For one, summoning was out of the picture since we just dodged them all each time and attack after it was done, and it wasn't really that fun. So in conclusion, it works better against the AI than against an actual human. Anyways, after her defeat, Helena reveals that the real threat is a guy named Thelnos, who's from another world? I didn't quite understand it, but the important part is that he's also gathered 5 runestones. Oh, and he's also allied himself with the god of destruction, and threatened Helena to steal the runestones of this land, or else he'd do something bad, I guess. It's just this tired old cliche of, oh, but she was a good guy all along. Up until this point, I felt that the story flow was okay. It transitions seamlessly between finding the king, finding the runestones, and then the defeat of Helena. The moment I found out about this supposed super evil guy like 2 stages before you actually fight him, I was like, okay. It never really felt like the game was building up to something like this. It doesn't help that we know next to nothing about this guy, other than that he's evil, supposedly, and that he was blackmailing Helena. In my opinion, this makes him a pretty weak antagonist. Nevertheless, that's our next objective, defeat Thalnos. After a bit of back and forth, getting the help of the god of creation, and finally making our way to the other side of some huge rift, we start the most tedious level in the game. Okay, maybe I wouldn't have been as negative if I'd gone in with a good deck. The thing about black is that every single enemy here is not only non-elemental, but also a boss monster. Some take so many cards to defeat, and at certain points, like these goddamn junctions, the enemies respawn. Like, who the hell thought it was a good idea to have respawning enemies in a game with limited attacking resources? This culminated in me only having 12 cards left when I was about to face the boss. 12! And most of them were cards I found in the level. I died, obviously, or rather ran out of cards. What I failed to realize though, as I immediately went back in to try again, is that all the chests I opened are now empty. The only thing I could do was streamline the level to use as few cards as possible until the fight, but even then I was cut too short. This is the only level where card regeneration summons are damn near required. I didn't waste any space in my deck for those cards because, well, I simply never needed them. Once I realized this, the fight was almost too easy. It was just that it took a while to actually damage him because of his incessant summoning spam. He is extremely fast too, so hoping to damage him with anything but weapon cards is not realistic. The absolute worst part though is when you defeat him and the God of Destruction just bursts out of him like a party popper on steroids. And then you fight him. Thankfully, you and your cards are fully healed, but that does nothing when one of his first attacks sends you straight down to 1 HP. This one is so annoying. I eventually figured out that I could just stand in one of the corners, which was just out of reach of the elementals he summons, and him himself. He almost never bothers to move even, so I just stood there a while and attacked him while his invincibility was down. And that's the end of the game. I don't think I like Lost Kingdom 1 as much as I like the second one. Admittedly, it has been a while since I played the latter, but I seem to remember that the sequel fixed a lot of the problems I had with this one. Not getting to immediately replay stages for one was a huge letdown, especially since there's a stage near the end where you can unlock 4 extra levels, which hold some of the best cards in the game. To unlock them, you need to have 20 different unique cards of the elemental stage you're trying to unlock, 20 fire to unlock the fire stage, and so on. The cards you get in these stages can be insanely helpful, especially in the last battle, and transforming one of these cards gives you the Doppelganger, which can kill even the last boss in just one hit. But what's even the point in that when you've already finished the game? And to actually unlock all of these levels, you need to run through the Rua Rock Temple 4 times, since once you reach one of the portals, you're booted straight out to the world map again. So you'll need to go through the same old boring hallways and solve the same old boring puzzle 4 times. It's not even a good puzzle. Actually, there aren't any good puzzles in this game. They try. The one on the bridge was okay enough, I guess, but the other ones feel more like an attempt at puzzles, which are actually just extremely linear obstacle courses. Another problem I have is with the camera. Oftentimes the levels are designed in squares, so it's not that noticeable, but once you get out in an open field or in a level that's designed diagonally, the fact that the camera only has 4 positions makes it kinda unwieldy. It also makes it hard to aim attacks in combat at times too. However, even despite these annoyances, I played this game for far longer than I thought I would. I could have easily stopped at the 8-hour mark after I took down the last boss, but I found myself coming back to try and collect all the cards. The cards themselves are fun to look at, and they contain an overwhelming amount of information. Way more than I thought, seeing as there are a whopping 105 of them. During my playthrough, I'd collected just shy of 90 or something before the last level, I think. And this was despite forgetting to use the capture mechanic for most of the time. As for FromSoft games, this is by far not the worst one out there. It's no Dark Souls by all means, but it's almost as interesting. A deck builder with action RPG elements of the likes that I hadn't seen before nor since. Well, except for the sequel. Hey there guys, I don't really have any ideas for a artsy ending this time, so I guess it's just gonna be me talking over some still picture or whatever. Not really gonna say much, just like the video if you liked it, be sure to subscribe maybe if you're new here, and any shares or whatever are very, very appreciated. So yeah, see you next time. Bye-bye.